Thank you everyone for joining us today for the 12 Secrets of Social Media Success from Hector the Connector. We're so glad that you are willing to share your secrets with us, Hector. So we'll let you begin.
All right. So I'm going to start out real quick, and this presentation is really designed to sort of answer some myths and misunderstandings and things that people just sort of get wrong with social media, because there's so much hype out there that people are just often misled. So the first thing I really want to clear up is that social networks and social media are not the same thing. So social network is something that you join, like Facebook, okay? And social media refers really to the advertising efforts that are done on social networks. So if you were in Facebook, you being a member is social networks, and the ad running in the corner is social media. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So the next thing, that this is like one of the 6 golden rules of social networking. So this one everybody should write down, and that is nobody joins a social network to be advertised to. Nobody joined Facebook or Twitter or anything like that to be hammered with ads. As a matter of fact, the fastest way to scare people off is to send them a lot of ads and coupons and all that kind of stuff, because they'll get tired of it very quickly, and they'll unlike you, unfriend you, block you, whatever they need to do, they will do that real fast. So the reason people join networks is to connect with their friends, family, coworkers, learn about places, people, and things, find interesting facts, be entertained, and to share information like news, documents, photos, and videos. Those are the reasons people join networks. They don't join with any intent to buy anything in any way, shape, or form. So how do you utilize, from a business perspective, social networks so that it can bring you business? Well, the best way to do it is using it just as if it was word of mouth. So if you're in BNI or some other kind of network, it's the same kind of thing, except it's an electronic version that can be spread very quickly. So it's very viral from that perspective, whereas word of mouth is usually from one person to another person to another person. Social media is from one person to many people simultaneously. So what works best? If a customer of yours provides a testimonial on Facebook or Twitter or any of those other places, it immediately goes out to all the people that you're connected to. Same way with a referral. If somebody says, this person did a great job for me and I recommend them, everybody else is seeing that also. So testimonials and referrals are very powerful messages that you really can't buy for love or money. How do you get your customers to sing your praises? You treat them really nice, do a great job for them. But you also ask them to do it. I know I have some clients that when they write up their testimonials and stuff, they'll give them some kind of gift card where they can go get a lunch or a dinner or something like that. But there are many different ways that you can essentially bribe your customers to follow through, because many of them will promise to do it, but they won't do anything. Mm-hmm. So if you give them an incentive to go ahead and follow through, more than likely they'll do that. The other thing that you can do in social networks is you can do lots of pay-per-click, pay-per-view type of advertising. And this includes LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, not so much Google Plus yet, but in Google Plus you would do it through Google search. So anyway, those are not the only ones that have these kinds of options. YouTube also has it as a pay-per-click type of option. And again, social networks are less expensive for pay-per-click for doing social media marketing than, say, Google search is for the most part. So to give you an example, I did a campaign not very long ago on LinkedIn. It cost me about $1.10 a click. So, and not only that, it captures their information and gives me their information too. And that same kind of prices you'll see normally in Facebook and in Twitter too. They have different kinds of click-through things. But again, you can use them very effectively if you take the time to test your message and then actually go through and do some test campaigns of, say, $100 a pop or something like that. Once you got a good message, you know that it's working the way you want, then you can run a regular campaign on it there. But the best way still is to get your customers to talk about you. So here's another one that I hear people say, well, social networking is free. Why do I need anybody to do that? The reality is social networking is not free in any way, shape, or form. If you do it yourself, you're going to be spending time and effort to build your network, to answer your clients, to put out messages, to research posts that you're going to be put on there. You're going to spend a lot of time. And if you have, multiple networks, so if you're on the top 5, let us say, you multiply that number by 5. So time is money. And again, doing social network marketing is not free. Now, that doesn't mean sweat equity isn't worth doing. I mean, I really believe it is. But it's not free in any way, shape, or form. Because if you're spending money doing your social networking, you're not spending money doing something else. Mm-hmm. So that's the main relevant point here. As a matter of fact, I've actually done lectures, and people walked up to me and said, I started using my Facebook stuff, and I was working on it about 8 o'clock at night, and then when I looked up at the clock, it was 2 in the morning. And that's a pretty common thing that people do. They get really engrossed in using it and posting things and searching for people and all that kind of stuff, and they can spend a huge amount of time on it. And what I tell people to do is really sort of try and control your time, calendar your time. If you're going to want to do this kind of stuff yourself, spend an hour or two every other day at most, and make sure that you organize your information. But you can spend a huge amount of time, especially researching things that you're going to post and making sure things that are timely that you post them. The next one I think people really don't get is that social networks are not private in any way, shape, or form. Okay? So, for example, if you're on Facebook, Facebook is selling your information as a target for advertisers. So they use your profile to target you. So you're really not private. You don't own your information on Facebook. As a matter of fact, posts you make don't belong to you on Facebook. They actually belong to Facebook. And that's one of the things you agree to when you sign up for their service. The same thing with Twitter and all these other different kinds of accounts. You don't really own the network. They're letting you use it for free so they can have access to your profile. Now, on top of that, criminals often frequent different networks because they're fishing for people's information or fishing for ways to get you to go to a website and click on something that'll make you give up your information. And I would tell anybody that if they're using social media extensively, if they're using social networks extensively, I highly recommend that you get ID protection in some way. Sign up for it, and it'll be a good way of protecting yourself. I wrote an article about 3 or 4 weeks ago called Trick or Tweet. And it was about all the hacking that was going on in social networking. And there's a link on that article that somebody can click on. It takes them to the FBI website. And on there it has a really good article that's produced by the FBI that tells about all the different tricks and scams that people are doing on social media. So I highly recommend you do that. If you go to Working the Web to Win, the blog on Blogger, you'll find the article there. I think it was in, I want to say March. So anyway, it's a big problem, but again, if you have ID protection, you're relatively covered. And again, if you don't really do stupid things like clicking on stuff that you know is no good, like if you have a good antivirus on your program, on your computer, I mean, it'll actually tell you when you're trying to visit bad sites. So again, word of caution on doing that. Now, here's a couple of things that you need to know. All followers need attention. There's 2 kinds of attention that they need. You need to pay attention to them if you want them to stay. You also, the people you want to go away, you got to pay attention to them too. Okay, so anytime you have followers, you have to manage them, because if people sign up to follow you and they're cursing or they're doing some lewd or lascivious stuff or pictures, you need to get rid of them if you're a business person, because again, you don't want those things on your Twitter site or any other site. And that's not just Twitter. It happens on Facebook. I haven't really seen it much on LinkedIn. But again, this is a kind of misbehavior that happens. People forget sometimes that these are not private networks. Okay? So every month or twice a month or so, you should go through and look at all the followers and get rid of the riffraff. I mean, if you got to block them, hide them, do whatever you got to do. Just get them off of there. If they're a client and they're misbehaving, you should mention to them that they're making themselves look bad and they could cost them business. Mm-hmm. And if they continue to do that, then you can hide them or block them or whatever you need to do. On top of that, if somebody asks you a question or they like something or they comment on something, you need to engage those people back. And I don't mean 78 hours later. I mean as soon as absolutely possible. If you want people to stay and they're saying, I like this and I like that and how cool is that, or they ask you a question, you better answer them or they're going to go somewhere else. So those are the two types of attention that you really got to pay to your clients. The bad ones where you want them to go away, and this is especially true on Twitter and maybe even on Google Plus, because again, people can follow you there without you following them back. So you can have unsavory people following you, and they show up in your profile as being somebody who's following you. So it's easy enough to block them in Twitter, and same thing, you can unfriend them and so on in Google+. So here's another one. You know, a lot of times people will go out there and they'll get on all the top networks and they'll say, I'm on social media. And then they'll discover after about 3 or 4 months that they're not growing. All right? Because social networks don't grow on their own. The way you make them grow is you have to invite and connect people. You have to work the network yourself. It's not going to just grow on its own. So what I usually tell people is you need to grow your network to a minimum of about 1,000 followers before you really start seeing any kind of traction or movement from it. Bigger is better, and this will not happen overnight. No matter what you do, it ain't going to grow real fast unless you're buying followers, and buying followers is not buying anybody who's going to be meaningful to you. You may have big numbers, but those people really aren't actionable followers. In many cases, they're fake. So I tell people, grow your following organically, and there's lots of ways of doing that. A good way to do that is to try and invite 3 or 4 people every day. If you invite 3 or 4 people every day, your network will grow steadily. So here's another thing. If you have your network on the top 5, a lot of people will tell me they're using social media, and they'll have them listed on their website and so on. But the reality is, if somebody's checking you out and you have them listed, you have LinkedIn and YouTube and Google Plus and all these things on your website, and then they click on that and you have 3 followers, you just made yourself look really bad. Okay? Same way with if you're on Facebook and so on. And again, we got to start somewhere. Everybody has to start at the beginning where we only have hardly anybody. But you don't want people looking at you and saying, okay, you have nothing. So it's not a hard thing to grow these people, but it just takes time. Now, when I say working the network, if you were in a face-to-face network, the only way those networks work for you is if you work the crowd. You go and talk to them. You ask them what they're doing, what they're looking for, and so on. This kind of network is no different. If you're not out actively inviting people to follow you, if you're not actively following people, if you're not actively asking your friends to join LinkedIn and Google Plus and Facebook and so on, your network's not going to grow. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to grow on its own. I mean, you'll get 2 or 3 people here and there, but you're never going to get to the numbers that you really need to make social networking and social media an effective marketing tool. Because you have to have big numbers, and I'll get to another slide in a minute here that explains why that's so important. So again, the top 5 networks are Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Google Plus, and LinkedIn. And what makes them the top 5? They have the biggest numbers. Facebook has 1 billion plus. YouTube has 800 million subscribers. Twitter has 585,000 subscribers. Google Plus is around the same number. LinkedIn, 250 million subscribers, something like that. So big numbers in all of them. And again, if you're going to fish in a pond, you might as well fish in the biggest pond you can. You can fish in these other ones. For example, Pinterest is really big right now, but Pinterest only has about 150 million followers. Still a big number, but way below all these other guys. So having your company on the top 5 social networks doesn't mean that you're using social media either. So here's the rule that I was telling you about earlier. You can think of it as just like the sales rule of 10. For every 100 people you touch, only 10 will be paying attention. And of those 10, only 1 will be really ready to act. So that's why it's really important to have a very large network. Again, if you have 10,000 followers and you post something important to them, only 1,000 people are actively paying attention at that point in time. So by the end of the day, maybe another 3,000 or 4,000 would see it. But if you only had 1,000 followers and you posted something, only 100 people are probably paying attention right then and there. And I'm being conservative when I say 100. It might be 50, okay? Because everybody's numbers is going to be different. But you can see why bigger is much more important. Does that make sense?
It does. And Hector, I know we're running out of time, so I was wondering if maybe we could invite you back another time to share the rest of the secrets, because I think we only got through about half of them.
That's about half right here.
Right, and we just always tell our listeners that we're on for 17 minutes, so we're really at the end of the time. So if you don't mind, I'd love to invite you back again, maybe next week. I don't know if you're available, but if not, let me know when, and we can do another Google Hangout to finish this.
Okay, sounds good to me.
All right, well, I appreciate you joining us, and thank you everyone for joining us for the 12 secrets of social media.
Thanks, Joanne.